Welcome into the GoVols247 podcast. I am Patrick Brown. I am joined by Ryan Callahan, if I can say his name right, here on Thursday of Tennessee, Florida week. We have a lot to get to here on this episode. We have not talked to you guys since post-game after Tennessee beat New Mexico State. Quite a bit's happened since then. We've got an injury report for Tennessee's going into this game on Saturday night against Florida. Boo Carter has been officially dismissed at long last. There's been a big top 247 update for the 2026 recruiting class that has seen some Tennessee players, or Tennessee commitments, I should say, move up and down. We will get to all of that and also preview a Saturday night showdown in the Swamp. It'll be weird, Ryan, driving back from Gainesville on Sunday and then Thanksgiving being 4 days away. I'm already worried about how my mind and my body are going to handle it.
It's really strange. I mean, this game has been played outside of September and October twice in the last 30 years. And one was the year they had to move it because of 9/11, and the other was the year of COVID. So this is really strange that this game is being played this late in the season. It's weird that they moved it to this late in the season, and the game ended up being not meaningless, but not meaning a whole lot for either team in its first year. It was set up to be potentially a college football playoff play-in game for Tennessee. I guess there's still an outside chance, but not much of one. So yeah, it's 7-3 against 3-7, not what the SEC might have envisioned with this game being moved toward the back end. But for Florida, at least it gives them something to play for these last 2 weeks. They got 2 rivalry games left to give players some motivation. And for Tennessee, it unfortunately sets up this weird dynamic where the Vols don't have a ton to gain. They're not going to go to an amazing bowl game, even if they win these last 2 games. But man, are these consequential for Josh Heupel and just sort of the status of this program going into the offseason. So really interesting weekend. But yeah, you're right. It's going to feel weird in a lot of ways, just going down there and coming back and transitioning into Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, and it's still got the big game treatment because it's a 7:30 ABC game. Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, Holly Rowe, they're getting the ABC A crew. Even though I guess Missouri, Oklahoma is probably the more impactful game in terms of the college football playoff. Tennessee did move up 3 spots to number 20 in the latest CFP rankings, but last I checked earlier this week, their playoff chances per ESPN's FPI were 0.8%, which is definitely the Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance, meme, GIF, whatever. But yeah, these are impactful games, like you said, and Tennessee will hopefully. They haven't won down there since 2003. I believe I think I was a sophomore in high school. I don't want to know what Ryan Callahan was doing in 2003.
I was at that game. Freshman in college. That was my first time ever going to a Tennessee road game that was not at Vanderbilt, and it was hot. That was like the first time the Tennessee Florida game in more than a decade had been not like the game of the week. Where it was the Ron Zook era. And it was like a noon game, and it was noon in September. So people were passing out in the stands. It was really hot. And yeah, Tennessee hit that Hail Mary before halftime to James Banks. And that was pretty much the only interesting thing about that game. It was pretty dull, but Tennessee won by 2 touchdowns. So yeah, that was the last time Tennessee won down there. And I was there. And I've seen a lot of bad Tennessee losses and a couple really, holy crap, how did they lose that game kind of losses throughout this past 20 years since then.
Yeah, I was answering questions for Graham Hall on our Florida site for their Behind Enemy Lines feature that I think they're going to run on Friday, and was kind of giving my prediction for the game. And I was kind of going through, okay, here's what I've seen in this stadium when I've seen Tennessee play Florida. And it's like, how could anyone feel good about Tennessee's chances of playing in that game? But
someone tweeted the 2015 clip last night, and I got to watch it again, and I hadn't watched the end of that game in a while, and it was kind of like the highlights from the final 5 minutes. Oh my goodness. That's the most ridiculous one, I think, of this run. I mean, most of these haven't been close, but 3 of the 10 have been decided by fewer than 10 points, and that was obviously one of them. But yeah, that was the famous standard 2-point chart that Butch Jones referenced after he didn't go for 2 early in the fourth quarter to go up by 14, ends up costing Tennessee the game. They give up 2 late touchdowns, including the one on the 4th and 14 conversion. Then they go back down the field, and Aaron Medley misses a 55-yard field goal by about a foot wide. I mean, it wasn't much off at all. So that was a crazy one. But I don't envision this being quite that much of a classic, but it might be that kind of game where Tennessee's got to sweat it out all the way to the end, even if they finally do get that long-awaited win in the Swamp.
Well, we're not going to reminisce too much because that'll just get people to not turn this on. We are live streaming this on our YouTube and our Twitter/X, whatever we're calling it these days. But this will be, if you're listening via podcast, traditional podcast, we appreciate that. If you're watching, and if you want to go back and watch it, you'll have to find this on our YouTube channel under the live tab. It doesn't show up, I think, with the rest of the video. So if you want to see our dumb faces, you can do that. But we'll get into, we'll start with the injury report that came out on Wednesday night, Ryan. The biggest, I would say, development, probably not the most surprising development, is that tight end Miles Kitselman has been listed out after he hurt his knee against New Mexico State. Other players listed out: Sidney Walton, the freshman safety, cornerback Ricky Gibson, and Jermon McCoy, and then freshman wide receiver Joakim Dotson. Dotson didn't dress last week, so and I think he's actually hit his 4-game threshold to redshirt, so that maybe that's a factor there. McCoy has been making steps to coming back, but doesn't sound like he's not going to play in this game. And I'd be very surprised if he suited up next week against Vanderbilt. Obviously, Gibson's been out all season, but Kitselman is the new one. Not really a surprise. Running back Peyton Lewis and offensive lineman Wendell Moy Jr. both listed as questionable. Ryan, we'll start with Kitselman, and certainly not a surprise given the way he reacted after he had his leg crashed into by Peyton Lewis, actually. They're down by the goal line, and certainly after the game in a big brace, didn't look very promising for his chances of playing in this game. I'd be surprised if he played again this season, which would be an unfortunate end for his 2-year Tennessee career. But Tennessee will turn to Ethan Davis, and then obviously they'll need freshmen Jack Van Dorselaer and Deshaun Brame to be ready to chip in as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is a blow to Tennessee's offense, especially going into a tough road environment where they're going to want to run the ball. And Florida has been a decent defense this year to where you worry about that a little bit. And Kitselman has been a really reliable blocker in the run game as much as anything, pretty reliable pass catcher a lot of the times too, even though he's had a couple of tough moments this year. But yeah, you're going to miss him there in the run game, especially if Ethan Davis is the main beneficiary of those additional snaps. Not that Davis is a bad blocker. I think he's come along pretty nicely in that area, but he's probably not quite the blocker that Kitselman is. So you maybe lose something there, and that might force them to play Jack Van Dorselaer a bit in some one tight end sets. I'll be interested in seeing if it's all Davis all the time, or if they mix in Van Dorselaer on some drives, or if it's a lot of 12 personnel, or what they do there. But Tennessee wanting to run the ball, that's a little more complicated now. And yeah, if Wendell Moy is out too, that would be a big deal. I think he's got a pretty decent chance of playing from what I've heard so far, but we'll see about that one. That's a pretty big one. Obviously, you'd have Sham Umarov. I'm assuming Jesse Perry will be good to go in this game, so you would expect him and Moy to be the starters if healthy. So Umarov would probably be the next guy in there if he's not able to go. But that would definitely, both of those guys being out would be a big deal for Tennessee in the run game and in this game in particular. Florida may get some guys back, at least a couple guys back. Obviously, Caleb Banks being one of them. That's not played many snaps, but 330-pound defensive tackle that had 4.5 sacks and 29 pressures last year. So Moy, I think, is a key one to watch the rest of the week to make sure they are at least close to full strength in the middle of that offensive line. But yeah, Kitselman, that's a blow, and like you said, doesn't look like he'll play again this season, barring a major surprise. So that's an unfortunate loss there for Tennessee. And now the rest of the week we'll kind of be keeping an eye on Moy and also Peyton Lewis. I think he got banged up pretty good. We said it Sunday night or Saturday night after the game. That drive in the third quarter, I think it was, of Saturday's game was pretty consequential for Tennessee in terms of injuries. You had Peyton Lewis hurt at the end of the drive. Kitselman and Moy got hurt during that drive, and one other player,
Deshaun Bishop too. Yeah,
Deshaun Bishop. So that 4 guys. I mean, Bishop's fine, but 4 guys like that getting rolled up on or hurt in the span of 10 minutes or so, if not less than that. That's a pretty detrimental drive. And you certainly, if you're Tennessee, you're hoping we're not looking back at that Saturday night and saying, man, that drive really cost them, multiple guys. You hope it's just Kitselman at this point, but still a couple more things to watch throughout the rest of the week.
Hey, but they went up 35-3 in New Mexico State. So, I mean, is what it is. But yeah, I mean, from kind of what you were saying, from what indications I've gotten, Peyton Lewis is a little bit more iffy than Wendell Moy. I think Moy looked like they were looking at his knee when he went down, and I think they ran out of room in the injury tent, so they were looking at Peyton Lewis's left ankle on the training table on the sideline. So Bishop was fine, though. fine as anyone could be at this stage of a long season, especially as a running back in the SEC. But he did media after the game, which generally is an indication you're okay. There's been situations in the past, even the Alabama game, we didn't talk to Joey Aguilar because he was getting treatment. So the fact that Bishop wasn't getting treatment at that point seems to indicate he's probably good. But we'll see. Ethan Davis, I think, is an upgrade as a pass catcher for Kitzelman, but I do think you lose a little bit in the run game as well. If Moy is out, when they took him out, Jesse Perry was who went in at right guard. Shane Umarov started at left guard in that game. They've been moving some of those pieces around on the offensive line, and I think they were trying to rest Perry last week too. So, he's what offensive lineman is 100% this time of year anyway. So we'll have to see what those guys can do, and there'll be further injury reports on Thursday and Friday night. The Friday night one will come after the team travel. Some names not on the injury report. We should mention Travis Smith Jr. is not on the injury report. He has not played, I believe, in 5 games. So it looks like Tennessee will finally have both him and Radarius Jackson back for the first time since at least September. And Arion Carter's not on there either. I wouldn't assume that he is 100% with double turf toe. I don't think he just goes away in 2 weeks, but him not being on there so far is an indication that he's going to play. And then a couple guys they held out last week, Joshua Josephs and Jordan Ross, were not on there as well.
Yeah, and I think those are still noteworthy because I don't think those guys will be, at least a couple of them probably won't be 100% this week. But I think this is the kind of week you expect those guys to go. So that's why they're not on the injury report at this point. We'll see if anybody else pops up on there Thursday or Friday. But definitely don't think it's a situation where they're just otherwise, getting a clean bill of health. There's some guys banged up. They're going to have to play through some things in this game. And you expect that in game 11. But that's, Florida's got some guys out. They've got a pretty healthy list of guys out for this game, including a couple of their top receivers. They'll get, at least there's a good chance. It sounds like they'll get Vernell Brown back at wide receiver. He's listed as questionable right now. So, but they're pretty banged up. They lost their starting edge rusher Gums, also out for this game. So they're banged up. Tennessee certainly banged up. And even some of those guys who are not on the injury report will probably not quite be 100%. Arion Carter is probably the big one to watch Saturday night. Just how much is he still affected by those injuries? The double turf toe, as you mentioned. That's one that's just probably not gonna heal in time for the end of the regular season. The only thing that's gonna make that better is rest, and he's not had quite enough after trying to give it a go against Oklahoma less than 3 weeks ago. So I wouldn't expect him to be 100%, but how effective is he? And is he out there, almost every down, or is he playing a more limited role? That I'll be fascinated to see how that works out, especially when you've had, Edwin Spillman starting in his absence and has obviously played a lot, played pretty well. Jaden Perlotti's been a regular rotational guy and has had some good moments. I think it's pretty up and down play from Perlotti with some missed assignments and things like that, as you see for a lot of freshmen. But, how do they sort of make that group work, and how well does Arion Carter play, and what will really be the healthiest he's been probably in several weeks, but still probably not 100%.
Yeah, Florida had 17 guys on its injury report, 12 guys listed out. The only one that really caught my eye was that backup quarterback Tramel Jones was questionable, I believe. And I know I don't want to bring that up for Tennessee fans because they already probably know who the Florida backup quarterback is, but I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Harrison Bailey's music. I don't even know if he's the third stringer for the Gators, but
you're just hoping for the story.
No, I'm not hoping for the story. No, I'm not. Let's be honest. One guy not on the injury report and not in the program at all anymore is Boo Carter. We haven't done a podcast since discussing that after the game. I think we were pretty pointed in saying that what was going to happen the next day, or what did happen the next day, was going to happen. That would be the end of the relationship between Tennessee and Boo Carter. He was officially dismissed, not part of the program anymore on Sunday. Josh Heupel addressed it on Monday. Really gave an interesting answer. I thought he was sort of asked if he had any regrets about giving Boo Carter a second chance, and it was not mentioned in the question, but it was second chance, third, so many chances for Boo Carter to get back on the straight and narrow path at Tennessee. But and Heupel said that, hey, this is kind of what you sign up for as a coach, right? You're tasked when you take these players in the recruiting process is you're going to develop them as players, but also develop them as men. And sometimes you've got to, go about the process that way. So he said he didn't have regrets, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes it didn't. It didn't work out this time. Ryan, what are your final thoughts on this situation?
Well, just in general, it's unfortunate that it had to come to this. Tennessee recruited Boo Carter for so long, there were people have asked, there were red flags in high school. There were opportunities that if Tennessee had wanted to take a different fork in the road and just get an exit ramp and just not continue recruiting Boo Carter, they absolutely would have been justified in doing that. They stuck with him. They thought, first of all, you can't blame Tennessee for that really, because some guys do mature. Some guys do grow out of the concerns, the maturity issues they have in high school. If everyone is judged by what they did when they're 16 and 17, you'd have a lot of good players thrown out based on things that they kind of outgrew. So, but that being said, they invested a lot and recruited him for a long time to get him, and obviously had to endure some headaches in his less than 2 years at Tennessee before it finally went off the rails completely. But we've said it over the past few months. Tennessee was maybe a bit too generous in giving Boo Carter a chance to play this season. You certainly could make the case that he should have been gone going into the season based on the way things went, how damaged that relationship was, not just between Boo Carter and Tennessee staff, but Boo Carter and some of his teammates at Tennessee. And Boo is the type of guy, I think, and I don't mean for this to sound the way it's probably going to, but he's sort of an ego-driven guy in the sense that I think a lot of his identity comes from the fact that he's a really good player, and he's always been thought of as that. And so when you know that your teammates maybe no longer hold you in the same esteem that you believe they once did, or at least some of them do, I think it's hard for a guy like Boo Carter to come back from that. And I think that at the end of the day, just made it easier for him to sort of check out. It looked like mentally toward the end of the season when he's not returning punts and things like that. And it looked like he just wasn't giving the maximum effort. And that obviously was kind of the final straw for Tennessee. So just the whole thing's unfortunate. It's all self-inflicted. And obviously it didn't have to go this way, but it did. And Tennessee eventually did what it, arguably should have done a few months ago and parted ways with him. So I'll be fascinated to see where he ends up. I hope for his sake he can turn things around and have a better ending to his college career than this year was for his time at Tennessee. But it's something totally unnecessary, and I guess give Tennessee some credit for handling it the way it needed to be handled once it got to the point of just silliness. But obviously it's something that didn't have to end this way at all.
Yeah, I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, is just kind of disappointing. I mean, this is a guy that is from the state of Tennessee, from down the road. Freshman season, he was an impactful player. You saw big things for him in his future based on what he showed you last season. And from kind of then on, almost going in the portal, and all the stuff that kind of came up during the summer, just sort of a disappointing situation that a talented player could make it work out. So we'll leave that there. I should say. Before we get into some recruiting round, we do have some comments and questions from those watching our YouTube stream. Papa J wants to know, what are the chances of Joey Aguilar applying to come back next year? Diego Pavia's was a lot more complicated compared to Joey. I asked Joey about this a couple weeks ago, actually during the bye week, and he said that his plan at this point was to go and see what he could get at the next level in the NFL. I don't know that he would apply for a waiver. I think it honestly would have to be a lawsuit, or a lawsuit from someone else that, as Diego Pavia's lawsuit did, created NCAA action. That's why Aguilar is here this season, is because of the NCAA waiver, the blanket waiver for all junior college players, saying that, hey, you get an extra year. That benefited Joey Aguilar, benefited Miles Kitzelman, it benefited Star Thomas. So this is quote unquote the extra year. It would take something along the lines of the NCAA saying, okay, junior college seasons don't count at all anymore, and you get 4 FBS seasons. If that was the case, Joey would have an extra year. But I don't think the NCAA wants to do that. They seem to be fighting some of these lawsuits. And I would say that a lawsuit, if Aguilar wanted to pursue it, wouldn't be a slam dunk. There have been some that have been granted. There have been some players that have tried to get their junior college years basically not counted or their eligibility extended because, the gist of this is that, hey, these players are saying, hey, the NCAA is restricting my earning ability, right? And certainly for Aguilar, he could come back and play at Tennessee again. I think it's been a pretty good partnership so far. And he could probably stand to make a lot of NIL money, whether it was at Tennessee or somewhere else, given the season he's had and given that now his story's out there a little bit, how marketable he is. But I'm just going to go off what he said a couple weeks ago. And Doesn't sound like that's something he's interested in pursuing right now. That could change. Eligibility is as fluid as it's been in college sports. So I think that's where we're at on that. Okay, Ryan, recruiting, new top two, not easy for me to say, new top 247 update. This is the chance for everyone to yell at you because quarterback Faison Brandon is still a 5-star, but he is now the number 2 player behind Keyshawn Henderson, right? A quarterback that's committed to Houston.
Yep.
I believe Tristan Keys dropped a little bit, but he's still a top 10 player. I think still the top wide receiver in the class. A couple of guys broke into the top 247. Kamari Blair is a guy I think you've mentioned maybe on this podcast is being a guy that's really talented. He shot all the way up to, I think, 110 overall. Zach Groves is in the top 247. TJ White, the linebacker out of Mississippi, made a big jump. And there's been some other movement as well. So pick 3 of those guys. Tyreek King got a 4-star from our guys finally. What are the biggest takeaways Tennessee fans from this update that Tennessee fans should be happy about, or maybe ones if they want to yell at you, what should they be yelling at you about?
Well, first of all, I'm glad personally that we got Kamari Blair up into the top 247. I did not necessarily count on him making that big of a move, but I think it's warranted. I did get a chance to go see him play earlier this year, ironically against Zach Groves in a head-to-head matchup. Really good game between those two teams, and I thought Blair was the guy that really stole the show in that game. He plays both ways in high school, so he kind of showed his athleticism and in that game, and he gave up nothing. I mean, Zach Groves got nowhere in their one-on-one matchups during that game. So he's been really good all year. I think that was a bigger win for Tennessee at the time than people might have realized at the time. So I think that's a warranted move up in the rankings for Kamari Blair. Zach Groves, again, he's a good player. I think he's a bit more of a boom or bust player to me, in my opinion, just because of sort of where he is in his development. I think he's a guy that's going to, even though he's listed as an edge rusher, I think he's going to be more of a defensive lineman. He's going to play probably a strong side end or maybe even a 3 technique defensive tackle in the long run, already up around 260 pounds. I mean, he's a good sized guy to be playing on the edge. So that's probably one of the reasons, a guy like Kamari Blair is able to handle him. He's not as quick as he was last year with the weight that he's put on, but I think he's still a really good player as reflected in the fact that he moved up in the rankings. But I think he's a guy that, there's a pretty wide gap between his ceiling and his floor, and I'll be fascinated to see kind of how that one goes in college. But obviously, a lot of potential there, and that's reflected in the fact that he's in the top 247 now. The move by Tristan Keys, and I'll go ahead and lump the Faison Brandon move in here too. I think at least partially a result of the fact that those guys have missed some time this year with injuries. Faison Brandon obviously missed the majority of the season, got hurt in his season opener. Injured the thumb on his throwing hand, and had surgery, I believe, to address that, and just came back last week for his team's first playoff game. They had a first-round bye, so he came back in time for the second round of the playoffs and should get to play the rest of the way and go for another state title to end his college career. So he'll be playing beyond signing day if things go according to plan for his team, which is unbeaten. But the fact that he missed some time, I think, complicated the evaluation for our analysts. You do want senior film. It's a big deal. Some guys get a lot better their senior years. Some don't make the jumps you expect them to make. I think our analysts like what they've seen from Brandon in 2 games this season, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's more about the guy that you're moving up. In this case, Keyshawn Henderson, as you said, is that guy that they're choosing to kind of double down on for now, and we'll see. There's still time for more changes because they've got the All-Star games in January and things like that will affect the final rankings that come out just before the old National Signing Day in February. And then Tristan Keys, also missed some time. I think he got banged up again Friday night, for that matter. Had a knee injury that they were looking at least. Not sure yet the severity of that one, but that's at least contributed to him sliding a little bit. Again, as you said, he's still the number 1 wide receiver in the rankings, but not the end of the world. And I'll just add, I think Tyreek King being a 4-star is very well deserved. Big gap still between where he is in the 24/7 Sports Composite, where he's just outside the top 100 nationally, and our current rating for him, which is now in the lower end of the 4-star range, but still at least respecting the talent level. I think a good bit there. A lot of good receivers in this class, as there are most years, but hard for me to envision him being a talent that's a high 3-star, just given how much I've seen him play the last few years and how dominant he's been really the last 2 years. I think just a really good player. I think he's going to have a nice career at Tennessee if things go the way I think they will. So that's one Tennessee fans should definitely be excited about.
Yeah, our Andrew Ivins is our director of scouting. Is that his title now? He sort of had a primer about who the new number one player or the number one player picture was going to be, and he was like, "Yeah, Faison has not played, and they sounded like they were going to drop him more, but then he comes out and plays. Was it last Friday night and looks awesome?" And he was like, "That makes this really hard." So I think they probably. I don't want to speak for Andrew, but it seems like they probably were dropping him a little more. And then they were like, "Oh shoot, this is." They reminded, as he put it, Faison kind of reminded them why they had him number one, have had him for number one for so long. So,
well, and I don't know that they were definitely going to drop him more, but I mean, maybe that was on the table. But yeah, I think at the very least, because you put a lot of time.
He hasn't played,
you put a lot of time in those top 10 spots, especially looking at those guys. You got a lot of opinions in the room as you're discussing those kinds of moves in the rankings, and you want to get those right. So they've obviously been looking at. I mean, Faison Brandon, we first had as the number one player in his class, I think in April of 2024. So I mean, they've been looking at him closely for more than a year and a half now. They've seen him in person. They've seen him in a lot of different settings. A lot of high school film to go by. Andrew mentioned in that story you referenced that kind of a big check mark for them is when a guy gets 35 high school starts. If Faison Brandon goes to the state title game, he'll have 36 high school starts in his career. So that's a really good thing to have going into college. That usually bodes well for a player's long-term development. So they go over this stuff as much as they can, and still at the end of the day, it's subjective. So you're deciding which players you want to bet on the most, but for Brandon to go from 1 to 2, it's not like they've lost a lot of faith in him. They still are projecting he's going to be the number 2 pick in the draft in a few years. If he's that, Tennessee fans are going to be pretty excited about him. So definitely no disrespect to him with that move from 1 to 2. It's just you got to kind of pick which horse you want to bet on a little bit more than another one that you usually really like both all along, and just kind of it's almost splitting hairs between 1 and 2 a lot of times.
And I believe we still have Faison ranked higher than anybody else, right?
We do. Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
He's a composite 5-star. Yeah, he's a composite 5-star, has been for a while, but his 24/7 ranking was several spots higher than his composite ranking before yesterday, and is definitely still higher.
Ryan, as we get back into our second half of our podcast here, we're going to shift more to a Tennessee-Florida preview. I know that gets everyone fired up. Tennessee fans love playing Florida.
Oh, yeah.
This is their favorite rivalry because it always goes so well. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, just sort of reminiscing about the dreadful times that Tennessee has had at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium down in Gainesville. Even the games they've won the past, the 4 seasons under Josh Heupel, they were favored at home. They still went down to the final play. Obviously, Dylan Sampson had the walk-off touchdown in overtime last season. Tennessee trailed 10-0 in that game. And then even the 2022 team had a 38-21 lead, and it got a little hairy there at the end. Florida was trying to throw to the end zone. So this game, for whatever reason, Florida just brings out the worst in Tennessee, kind of like Tennessee brings out the worst in Kentucky. It's just how it is. So, but who knows what to expect from Florida in this game. This will be their 4th game under interim head coach Billy Gonzalez. He took over for Billy Napier, who was fired after a win, ironically, against Mississippi State back in October. I think, 22-23 overall. You kind of saw that coming. It was sort of a matter of time for Florida after the way they started this season, losing to USF, losing to Miami. Did they lose another game in there? I can't remember. LSU.
Yeah.
He had kind of saved his job last season. They finished really well, won 4 games to finish 8-5. They were a preseason top 10, top 15 team. Everybody thought DJ Lagway was going to be the next great Florida quarterback, and it just hasn't worked out for him this season. But I mean, first of all, they played a ridiculous schedule. I think 6 top 10 teams. Some of those teams have fallen off from when they played them, but 4 top 5 teams, and really Florida's been competitive in just about every single one of those games. I think the second half against Texas A&M in College Station got away from them a little bit. Miami pulled away from them because eventually, their defense was. I remember watching that game. Florida's defense was playing great in that game, but their offense was just so bad that eventually the defense just kind of wilts. And then, of course, they just no-showed entirely against Kentucky. You're probably watching that game if you're a Tennessee fan thinking, hey, that if they've given up, that bodes well for us. And then Florida comes out in that last week and plays Ole Miss well into the 4th quarter and has a lead in that game in the second half. So who knows if Florida's going to, they're back at home. But who knows how, what the crowd's going to be like. It probably won't be full swamp experience, but, Florida fans are still, they can still get loud down there. And they've got a chance to sort of salvage this lost season. They play Tennessee at home and Florida State at home the next 2 weeks. The season obviously has been pretty bad for them, and they're obviously more focused on the courtship of Lane Kiffin, which is sort of hit another gear this week with Ole Miss not playing, and get his family checking out Baton Rouge and Gainesville and all that. So this is sort of the background to that, but Tennessee still got to go down there and play well, which they don't normally do. So what do you expect from Florida, Ryan? Obviously, this is a team that's got a lot of injuries, new coaching staff. They're very close to the offseason when futures are going to get resolved, and it's probably hard to keep your focus as a player, as a coach. As a coach, you're wondering, okay, where, is the new guy going to keep me? Where's my next job? Where do I got to move my family? As a player, I'm sure these guys have had family members, coaches, trainers who have you, agents in their ears saying, hey, this school's interested in you, all that stuff. Do we expect, what do you expect to see from Florida, or can we know?
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to know, but I will say my view on Florida has changed a lot since I badmouthed them, a week ago, 2 weeks ago in one of our podcasts. Very consistent in my opinions on Florida, but they, before the Ole Miss game, it looked like they had checked out. The Kentucky game was ugly for them. And made people think they'd kind of quit on the season. I mean, I'm not saying Kentucky's 31 points better than Florida, but I think part of that's Kentucky's playing pretty well right now. That Tennessee win up in Lexington is going to look pretty good here at the end of the season because Kentucky is playing better. And that was just clearly a terrible game for Florida. They bounce back and go to Ole Miss, and they take a 4-point lead into the fourth quarter of that game. Have a chance to maybe not ruin Ole Miss this season, but greatly damage their playoff resume. And Ole Miss came back and won that one in the fourth quarter. So they looked like a more motivated team. And on one hand, you've taken a bowl game off the table for them. I'm not sure how much of a motivating factor that is for any player these days when so many guys, opt out of bowl games to begin with. But, that's off the table. They're 3-7, but they're back at home for the first time in more than a month. The last time they played at home, fans were chanting, fire Napier or whatever. And now that's off the table. So fans can just sort of rally behind this team. They're getting a couple guys back, it sounds like, from injuries. We mentioned Banks, the defensive lineman, and Vernell Brown, the freshman wide receiver, their leading receiver this season. It sounds like he may be back. He's listed as questionable officially on the availability report, but it sounds like our guys that are at Swamp 24/7 expect him to return this week. So that would be a big deal. So there's some things like that align well for Florida going into this game. And, they get a couple chances to end the season with rivals here, Tennessee and Florida State, where, you at least have the motivation of, in a terrible year, we can still beat Tennessee
and FSU,
we can still beat Florida State or whatever. So there's a chance for them to at least salvage that out of the season. So I expect Florida to show up and play pretty well and be a tough out for Tennessee at the very least. My thoughts on what this game will look like have changed at least a little bit. I think Tennessee absolutely can still win this game on the road, and they're favored for a reason, but just kind of a combination of where Tennessee is, Joey Aguilar not taking great care of the ball. Their offense has not been overwhelmingly good lately. I'm not sure they're in the best spot to go to expect them to go to the Swamp and win easily. So the way Florida played last week and, getting some guys back, Tennessee being banged up, it all just sort of makes me think this is going to be a pretty close game and that Tennessee's going to have to play well to win on the road. And this is the one that, I've heard people say different things about this, the two games remaining. If you had to, I think if they lose one of them, no matter who it's to, there's going to be people upset. If you lose to Vanderbilt, people are going to be upset because it's Vanderbilt. Doesn't matter if they're a possible playoff team. You're not supposed to lose to Vanderbilt at Tennessee. And if you lose to Florida, it's going to be, Josh Heupel in year 5 still can't win on the road at Florida. That's not a good sign. I think this is the one people might be more upset by, though, because Florida is 3-7 again. And if you're not going to beat Florida this year, when are you going to win down there? So many things line up well for Tennessee going into this matchup. Florida not being good. DJ Lagway leading the SEC in interceptions after we thought he might be a top 3 quarterback in the SEC going into the year. They've not been healthy. There's just a lot of reasons to think Tennessee should win this game this year with a better team that's actually got something to play for. But it doesn't look like it's going to be anything like we would have expected on paper. It looks like it may be a really tough game for Tennessee. And if they were to lose this one, I think there will be quite a bit of teeth gnashing among Tennessee fans. And this rivalry does that. So that's part of it. It's the history. That's not Josh Heupel's fault, really. But then, I think the reality is going to be if they lose this game, fans are going to be saying, here we go again. We got a coach in year 5 that looked like he had us going in the right direction and still can't win on the road at Florida. what is wrong here, and it's going to lead to a lot of questions. So again, I think it's a very consequential game, and unfortunately for Tennessee, I think it's going to be a really tough one.
Yeah, see, I think that's where you and I are going to differ, because to me, if there's a split, like, Tennessee fans have seen this movie over and over again of them going down in Florida and losing. It's not like Florida's been a juggernaut for all of that losing streak. Certainly, there was some early Urban Meyer would fit in that realm, and Denver had some good teams. But the thought of Vanderbilt, winning, and I think Vanderbilt's playoff chances have really taken a hit over the past few weeks, because Oklahoma's they look like the 6th SEC team right now, and the SEC is not getting 6 teams in. The thought of Vanderbilt winning and Diego Pavia celebrating on your field, just keep that in mind if things go south Saturday night, and maybe withhold some of your anger, because it could still get worse. But no, but I think a great point from Donovan Milliken in our YouTube chat. This game comes down to turnovers and getting off to a fast start, because it's a night game and Florida will not lay down. Ben Sherman also says, "Hey, need to have a turnover-free game." I think that's a huge key.
You might say they won't. You might say they won't back down.
Well, that'll be a great moment. Either way, but yeah, it's to your point about Florida's interest level. Tennessee gets up early, which they have. They've led this game the last 2 times they've been down there. It was 14-10 in the second quarter, right? 2 years ago, they had the long touchdown to Javonte Payton, or 4 years ago, I should say. 3 years ago, they go right down the field, touchdown pass for Mel Keaton. I think they hit Squirrel White on a big play, and then it was they led 14-10 in 21, and Florida scored 28 in a row. They led 7-0 in 23, and Florida scored 26 in a row. So, but yeah, if you're able to get off to a fast start, that's maybe when Florida, their interest level might wane. So, but at the same point, Ole Miss led 10-0 last week, and Florida came rolling back. So, I would be surprised if Florida laid down in this game. And to the points of Donovan and Ben in our comment section, like, Tennessee turnovers are going to be huge, right? Ryan touched on it with DJ Lagway, leads the SEC in interceptions. Joey Aguilar's thrown 4 in the past 2 games. That'll probably be one of my bold predictions, is that the quarterback combined for 5 interceptions, or the teams combined for 5 interceptions. But this Florida team, looking at them on defense yesterday, I got my matchups piece on the site now. The other half will come tomorrow. But this defense has given up 34 plus points in 3 games. They've been gashed on the ground the last couple of weeks by Ole Miss and Kentucky, but in a lot of games they've had really good stretches where they've shut teams down for 5 and 6 and 7 possessions in a row. They, even that Kentucky game when they gave up 38, they had 4 turnovers. They had 4 takeaways in that game. They held Carson Beck to season lows and completions and passing yards. They battered Arch Manning. So this defense is capable of generating or getting Tennessee into those kind of lulls that we've seen that have been bad. And certainly, turnover margin has been key for Tennessee and its wins and its losses. So taking care of the ball will be key. And then defensively, let me see another Papa J with a great Tennessee fan Florida Week comment. I hope we don't make Lagway look like an all-pro like we have with other quarterbacks.
See, that's the other thing. He's capable of that.
Yeah, he is.
One of those guys that if you give him open receivers, he'll throw to them and make it look pretty good. So I don't think he's fully healthy. He's not been right all year, but man, that's the part that worries you. If Tennessee doesn't get a pass rush, if their secondary doesn't play well, we've seen what this secondary is capable of, and they might give DJ Lagway his best moment of the year. They're certainly capable of that. So that needs to be their motivation to not let DJ Lagway end this tortured season on a pretty high note with an upset of a ranked Tennessee team.
And Jaden Baugh is a guy. Tennessee recruited him, right?
Yep.
Big back. You got to go tackle him.
I was telling someone earlier
better, but
I think Jaden Baugh was on the field when Tennessee fans rushed the field for the after the Alabama game back in 2022. So yeah, he was recruited by the Vols, visited multiple times. We've seen plenty of those guys over the years that these two teams have battled for, or one's gone after a player harder than the other, or whatever. That was the case with him. Tennessee wasn't all in on Jaden Baugh, and he ends up at Florida. So that definitely some history there. I was going to mention earlier before I forget, Urban Meyer is returning for this game, and that's one of the the major attractions for fans for this one. So if you're looking for a reason to have the bad juju going into this game, Urban Meyer coming back to the Swamp, that doesn't sound great. If I'm a Tennessee fan, I don't love hearing that. If I'm looking for reasons to be worried about this game, so maybe it won't mean anything, but hey, that's at least something else fans can enjoy for Florida. That'll make this game interesting. But yeah, night game in the Swamp. I've never seen that place be anything but a good environment. So I will be fascinated to see what that's like for a 3-7 team that doesn't have a lot to play for. Does that place still get loud? I'll be pretty impressed if it's still a really good environment. But fans usually kind of check out on games like this and seasons like this. But maybe they'll rally behind this team, knowing they've at least shown some fight in recent weeks, and that they that they got rid of the coach they wanted to get fired, and now there's no reason not to just support them, I guess.
Is this their first home game since
Napier was fired? Yeah.
It'll be a big celebration of Florida fans. Hey, ding dong, the witch is dead.
Yep.
And maybe Lane will have some representatives there. Maybe he'll have some family members checking out. Maybe he'll send some of his crew to Gainesville to see a night game there. Maybe he'll send his crew to Baton Rouge to see a night game there playing Western Kentucky at the same time. So
yep.
Maybe Lane will have some spies there to check out the atmosphere and see what it's like. And so
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on this, but how weird is it going to be? I mean, Lane Kiffin, this guy that Tennessee fans have had this love-hate relationship with for years, and they've kind of come to love him more in recent years, it feels like. I think there's still some hate, but like most of the time, like if Tennessee was searching for a head coach tomorrow, I think a lot of fans would want to hire him. Like they would want to bring him back. And for a guy like that to go to a place like Florida, which he once accused of cheating when he was at Tennessee and seemed to love to rile them up. I mean, it would be wild if he ends up being Florida's coach and coaching against Tennessee with the Gators visor on.
Yeah, so that would be wild. Ryan, I'll be honest. I don't like Tennessee's chance in this game. I am jaded from my previous experiences going to that stadium. I've seen Tennessee melt down in all sorts of ways. And the way I look at it is, hey, Florida's still a talented team. Florida's still, they played a tough schedule. They've been in every game. I mean, everybody talked about how they laid down against Kentucky. Well, the week before that, they had Georgia very much on the ropes. I mean, fourth quarter of that game, they're leading and driving to go up maybe 2 scores. That was the first game, with the interim coach. Maybe the second game is where that bump sort of goes away. But yes, it's easy to look at this team, and Josh Heupel has said this week, and some players have said this week too. Like, hey, their record is one thing, but this is still a pretty good team and a typical Florida team. So the way I look at it, and the reason I don't have a lot of confidence, is this is a pretty mistake-prone Tennessee team I think we've seen, and now they're going to go play in the stadium where Tennessee has a history of meltdowns. Now, Heupel said earlier this week that, hey, none of those games are going to have anything to do with that game. He's probably right. I think I was counting my head earlier, maybe 8 or 9 guys that are going to start for Tennessee that were even on the team 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So this is not the era where, you have guys on your team that were freshmen in 21 when they went down there and lost, and were on the team in 23. Like, your rosters turn over so much that you don't really have that anymore. But Heupel said, hey, that, we talked about it early in the week. We're talking about the streak, but we're not. They're aware of it, but they also know that this is a rivalry. I just don't have a lot of hope. And Donovan here, we have all seen Apollo die. This is the same movie. Too soon, first of all. I'm still not over that. From Rocky IV, which is that's a whole nother debate that we've had at past iterations of the GoVols247's staff. It's not really a movie as much as it is a series of montages. But we've seen a lot of montages for Tennessee in Gainesville that have had bad endings. So, Ryan, are you more confident than me? You've been the sunshine pumper all year on our staff. Are you getting the warm and fuzzies? Because I'm definitely not.
I'm not. This is the game I had as Tennessee's third loss going into the season for that same reason. I believe they win this game when I see it. But I also thought Florida would be, 5-5.
Not a dumpster fire.
Yeah, I thought they'd at least be a 500-ish team going into this game. I knew they had a tough schedule, knew it didn't set up well for them to have a great year, but didn't think they'd be 3-7 with a loss to Kentucky, a 31-point loss to Kentucky at that. So there are still more reasons than ever to think Tennessee should be able to win this game on the road. The problem is, and it's crazy to say this about a Tennessee team that's 7-3, ranked 20th in the playoff rankings, and that still mathematically has a chance to make the playoff, even if it's not going to happen, most likely. If you want to make the case for them that they're a good team, you can make that. But if you want to make the case that they're not very good, you can make that one too. Because let's think about it. Their best win all season is what? At Mississippi State. And that was a game you had to come back and force overtime. In some ways, their biggest feather in the cap this year is the fact that they lost to Georgia in a close game. A game they should have won probably on a last-minute field goal. But regardless, they didn't. And that is kind of the one thing I think people have looked at all year and said, they must be pretty good. They nearly beat Georgia. Aside from that, they haven't done much yet that really proves that they're a very good team. So, and then you combine that with sort of the way teams have played Tennessee in recent weeks. Even New Mexico State had some success in keeping Tennessee from really stretching the field. They had the one deep ball to Chris Brazzell last week, but otherwise I don't think they had a pass of 20 yards or more outside of that one. So, I would imagine Florida's going to do the same thing to Tennessee's offense that everybody else has done, which is
that's kind of what they've done, especially the last 3 games. I think you can count on 2 hands how many deep shots opponents have even been able to take. And Ole Miss is a team that stretches the field too, in that sense.
Yeah. So I think they know what they've got to do, and it's going to be on Tennessee to execute its offense really well, not make a bunch of critical mistakes as they often do in this game. And that includes false starts. If they have a different offensive line unit out there, that's a concern. It's a concern even if they have their usual 5 starters out there, that they've got to handle the crowd noise, assuming it's a tough environment, and just not pee down their leg as they've done so many times in this situation at the Swamp. I think they are capable of doing that, but I think those things are going to present some natural challenges. And then you throw in what Tennessee's done defensively a lot of the year, and the fact that New Mexico State threw for a bunch of yards on Tennessee. I mean, DJ Lagway is absolutely capable of having a nice game against Tennessee and reminding everyone of how talented he is, even if his numbers this year have not been impressive overall. So there are just enough reasons to put that doubt in the back of your mind that this one could go the same way the last 10 games have gone there for Tennessee. But I think if you're looking for reasons for optimism, they're there too. So it really is just going to depend on which Tennessee team shows up. The problem for me is that kind of more human-looking version of this team has shown up a lot more lately than the good version. We've not seen that good version of the team consistently since September. I think this team's just not been quite the same since that first open date, as they've gotten into the meat of the SEC schedule, and really the best game they've played since then was at Kentucky, I would say. So they've otherwise recently they've been a mistake-prone team. They've made some really critical errors, and Joey Aguilar has got to be the best version of himself if Tennessee is going to go on the road and win this game. Yeah,
to me, Tennessee is a good team. Like they're a good team that plays bad, and Florida is a good, bad team. That's kind of how I look at this game. Donovan made a point when we were talking about Tennessee's strength of wins. The committee said Oregon gets credit for beating Penn State. We beat Syracuse, and they were 3-1 until their quarterback went down. They were 3-1 and had just won at Clemson. So that is a good point. Syracuse has not won since. So just think if they hadn't got Steve Angeli in the portal in the spring.
Yeah.
We'll get out of here on this. Donovan has been lighting up our comment section. We did not ignore your question here. This is a quarterback question. Ryan loves these. Ryan loves this debate about what Tennessee should do at quarterback after this season. If a quarterback like Sam Leavitt hit the portal, Sam Leavitt is at Arizona State. Should Tennessee go after them because they are going to have to add a third quarterback? I think Ryan and I both agree that Tennessee needs a third quarterback. But if you're going to go for a guy like Leavitt, if you were just hypothetical, there's been some rumblings about Lenora Sellers. What's he going to do? I suppose Lagway could probably fall on that boat too of, somebody could poach him. If you're going to be fishing in that end, you're going to have to pay for it. And that'll probably mean the 2 young guys that you are going to, or are paying already, George McIntyre and Faison Brandon being that, you can't really pay 3 quarterbacks that much, or you can't expect to have those 3 guys on the roster at a time in this day and age. Just look at the NFL, right? A lot of NFL teams have they have their franchise guy, they have maybe a veteran backup, and then they maybe have a developmental guy, somebody they may have put draft capital in. I'm not going to point to the Titans. That's maybe not a good example. If I had an example of what this looked like from a current NFL team, it would make more sense, but I don't. So Ryan, what is your take on this quarterback situation? And we'll get out of here after that.
Yeah, I don't think Tennessee should go after a guy like Sam Leavitt. I think you have to think about, we said this before in other circumstances, you've got to think about putting together a team while managing a salary cap. And it's just not smart to spend that much of your salary cap on one position, even if that's a really important position like quarterback. So I think the smarter, more prudent path, and not to mention, isn't Sam Leavitt a sophomore? So he would technically have 2 years of eligibility left, if I'm not mistaken. And the worst thing you could do is bring in a guy that's got a couple years left, and he doesn't just come in for 1 year, and then suddenly you are at risk of losing George McIntyre and Faison Brandon, because those guys might not stick it out if you bring in a guy with a couple years of eligibility that plays in front of them and they don't get a fair chance to win the starting job or whatever in their minds. So I just think you've invested so much money in those guys and so much to making sure you got them both on campus, and you're assuming they're probably going to be together for 1 year because whoever doesn't win the job and run with it might be out the door in 2027. So you've got to make the most of that year. You got to make sure you get your quarterback of the future right. And if you weren't going to play those guys, you shouldn't have invested in the way you did. So I think what they need to do for a third quarterback, I've said, and I think you've got to thread the needle a little bit to do it, because it's got to be a senior. I think it's got to be a 1-year guy, or at least someone that you're definitely not going to bring back in 2027, no matter what, or someone who's not going to care to be a third quarterback in 2027, maybe, because I would go get maybe an FCS guy or even a Division II guy, someone that you're willing to give a chance to compete for the job, but not someone that you fully expect to win it. And Sam Leavitt would be a guy that you're not bringing him in unless you're starting him. So,
and he's going somewhere to start.
Yes, 100%. And he's going to get a lot of money probably to go wherever he goes. So, and that's the main thing for me, though, is you can't spend a huge percentage of your cap on the quarterback position. And there's a fascinating long-term discussion that probably needs to be had, if it's not already taking place at Tennessee, about whether they want to continue to invest in high school quarterbacks at such a high level when you've had a decent amount of success with Joey Aguilar, who you didn't have to break the bank to get out of the transfer portal. So, to that point, you've gone down this road already with McIntyre and Brandon. I think you got to let those guys battle it out with maybe another veteran thrown in there just to push those guys. But ideally, I think you'd have one of those guys win the job next year and not have to start a transfer.
Yes, I think the debate is, should Tennessee keep that money in George and Faison, or should they go get a big guy in the portal? That would be the question, but that's another debate for another time. We'll leave that there for now. So we will have plenty of coverage throughout the rest of Thursday and into Friday. We will make our score predictions on Friday, probably from somewhere along Interstate 75. We will have the whole crew rolling down to Gainesville with me, Ryan Callahan, and Ben McKee. I, of course, will be driving. And then Ben will go to Las Vegas for basketball. Tennessee plays Rutgers in Houston next week in Las Vegas. Next week. I think it's Monday and Tuesday. So a little pre-Thanksgiving hoops for Tennessee fans to occupy themselves between Florida and Vanderbilt. We obviously have plenty of coverage from Gainesville before, during, and after Tennessee's game at Florida on Saturday night. 7:30 game, ESPN, ABC, and then we will have a podcast for you after that, breaking down that game. We hope everybody has a good rest of the week, and we appreciate you listening to the latest episode of the GoVols247 podcast. For Ryan Callahan, I'm Patrick Brown. We will talk to y'all in a few days.